Tell us about the machine, or the Dalio's machine, and how it kind of fits in with this context here.
Well, Ray is the person who wrote Principles, guy who's built the most successful hedge fund in the world, and wrote this book where it basically tells you how he approaches his work, blow by blow, in only the way that probably someone who's as sort of mathematical and analytical as him could do, which is just in a bunch of steps. And one of his kind of philosophies around building a company is that effectively you're trying to build a machine, and that you're putting in place all these different functions of the machine that interact with one another. And your job as the business owner or manager or CEO or team leader or whatever is to basically look down upon that system and design it in a way that it's kind of autonomous. It works like that. So you might have an operations system you might have an HR system, you might have a sales and marketing system or something. And that involves the people who are working there, the processes they use, the customers, how they interact with you. All these things are part of this machine. And you need to make sure that you make it so that thing's running as smoothly as possible and as efficiently as possible.
That's exactly right, mate. And this doesn't necessarily it doesn't just apply to, the biggest hedge fund in the world size business. This applies right down to the sole proprietor, and how you implement the systems within your business. So, if you do need to hire someone, if you are making sales calls, you aren't creating it from scratch every single time. You've got maybe some talking points to go to through that hiring process, through that sales process. You've got set templates for how you do things. All this stuff is building that machine. These are the little things you can, and things get a lot more sophisticated as you start bringing in technologies, you start bringing in ways of building culture and people systems. It's very much you needing to make less decisions in that particular moment. You've scaled out your decisions.
So in the book, he talks about this kind of imaginary marketing agency that does all types of different marketing. They basically, a customer rings them up, they do whatever the customer asks, and they're kind of pretty good at a lot of things, but the business is struggling to really, break out. And also it all comes back to the owner, all the questions and stuff, because every assignment's very different. It all kind of has to be bespoke each time they do something. They never have really, the customer can kind of ask them whatever they want, and they have one or two really big clients that give them all the work. I think it's called the Stapleton Agency. And the book's kind of revolves. The book kind of revolves around the owner, and he goes to a mentor, and the mentor takes him through the steps to transform his company. And probably the first one, Ryan, that you kind of wanted to talk about was kind of something that kind of helps you build that machine.
Yeah, there's one little undercurrent that is throughout this entire book that I think it never gets explicitly called out, which you've just hit on, mate, is how often do people have business mentors? How often do people have coaches and things for their own businesses? And I think the entire story is who's the person that's teaching the main character, the protagonist along the story, in this book. He's always been guided by this coach, this mentor, in the way the story is framed. And I don't think a great deal of, particularly in the small business category, have business coaches or have these mentors that they go to. Is that a fair statement?
I would say so. Yeah. I mean, I think that's generally true. I mean, for me,
you are an exception.
Yeah. I have, but I'm lucky to have one. But there was a certain point that we got to in our company about 4 years in, where we just got to the point where we said, geez, this is getting really hard. And it's really difficult, feel a bit alone out there trying to figure these problems. And so we appointed an advisory board, and it actually changed everything for us, really, and certainly helped us take the stress out of running the company.
Yeah, and I think that that ties back to what we were just talking about before, which is this. You're like outsourcing a lot of the decisions and a lot of the burden that goes into making decisions, particularly in spaces that you just haven't ventured through before, that you haven't seen before. And I think there's a real power in that. It's not. There's all these rules throughout this book. It's like Ted's rules or Ted's tips, because Ted's the mentor, yeah, and I don't think it gets called out across all the 20 tips that there are in the book that having a business mentor is probably a crucial one to allow any of those tips to occur in the first place. So I do want to point that one out.
Wow,
before
that's a very insightful. I actually hadn't thought about that.
Either did I, until you gave me the perspective shift in that moment, Locke. So thanks for that, mate.
Have you found someone?
Yeah. I tend to talk to you a lot about business, Locke. So, I think people have a lot of. Sorry, I think just having lots of conversations around business with other people who run businesses or who are in high leadership positions at certain companies. I think that helps. Just the diffusion of those conversations. So I wouldn't say I've got something as explicit as your advisory board, but that might be something that comes later down the track.